My name is Warren Langell, Strategic Communications Director for Global Justice Ecology Project, and I will be moderating today's Atlantic Coast Pipeline Media Teleconference. This telepress conference is hosted by Global Justice Ecology Project along with the Friends of Buckingham and the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative. A few notes before we start. We will hear from our four speakers, and after they have spoken, we will take questions from the media. I ask everyone to keep their microphone muted unless you were speaking to ensure we can hear all the presenters. As was said before, that when it is time for question and answers, all the phone people on the phone will be unmuted. So if you have other people that are on line and they have a question, if you're a member of the press, please use your chat function to let me know in a private message. I am listed as the organizer or moderator, actually. Please include your name and affiliation, and I will call on you. At that time, please unmute your mic and ask your question. I want to let anyone on the call who is not press know that this is a press conference and that statements made may be recorded and used by the media. Global Justice Ecology Project is also recording this press conference. I want to thank the media who are joining us, and thanks to all those who will present. My name is Warren Langell from Global Justice Ecology Project. We're a nonprofit organization that works nationally and internationally on the intersection of social, ecological, and economic issues. We support Indigenous people's rights. We're involved in forest protection. We're the coordinating body of the international campaign to stop genetically engineered trees. And we are outspoken advocates for climate justice. Global Justice Ecology Project co-founded the Durban Group for Climate Justice in Durban, South Africa in 2004, Climate Justice Now in Bali, Indonesia in 2007, Climate Justice Action in Copenhagen, Denmark in 2008, and is a founding member of Climate Justice Alliance in the United States since 2013. We also amplify the voices of frontline communities fighting the impacts of climate change, the fossil fuel industries, and land grabs linked to false solutions to climate change. Our role in this telepress conference is to highlight the presenters' messages. But to make it perfectly clear, Global Justice Ecology Project is 100% against the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and any other projects that jeopardize community and planetary health. After all, we are in a climate crisis, and I think we all need to keep that in mind as things progress. I want to say again that any and all statements made here may be recorded and used by the media. We are also recording this press conference. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Chad Oba. And Chad, please turn on your computer camera and unmute yourself. I think your camera's already on. Chad Oba is a co-founder and chair of Friends of Buckingham and lives approximately 1 mile away from the site of the proposed Union Hill compressor station. She's a mental health professional who has worked with families in Buckingham for the last 25 years. So go ahead, Beth. Thank you.
Chad.
Oh, I'm sorry. God. Already I got to be corrected. So sorry, Beth. I'm so sorry, Chad. I'm so sorry, Beth. I'll be quiet.
So I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, fine. Well, in August of 2014, I woke up, it was a fine day, and I learned something later that day that changed my life entirely for years and for many of the people who I live near, my neighbors. This is when I learned that there was an enormous compressor station that was going to be sited in our rural but populated neighborhood. And not very far from my home personally, about a mile, but a lot closer to a lot of my other neighbors. And this was part of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. It's the only compressor station, we learned soon after, that was going to be located in Virginia as part of the 300 of the pipeline in Virginia, the entire length being 600 miles, starting in the fracking fields of West Virginia, running down through Virginia and into North Carolina. So we very quickly organized at that point and started to identify our allies. I went house to house, let my neighbors know. Many of my neighbors don't have internet connections. It was not easy to communicate, actually. You know, I knew my closest neighbors, of course, but we really had to make an effort to reach out. And so two of the most important allies at that point in time were the Union Hill Church, which was going to be, and the Union Grove Church, because they were in very close to the locality of the compressor station, and also Yogaville, which is within 5 miles. So we allied from the very beginning with these two groups, and I live in the Union Hill neighborhood. But we soon learned what this really meant for us. Compressor stations, for those of you who don't know, pressurize the gas and push it through the line. And they're kind of the black heart of the whole gas pipeline. So when this happens, they emit terrible pollutants. And we're yet to find a compressor station anywhere, and we've really researched them, where people don't report a lot of sickness around them. Everything from respiratory to heart disease, gastrointestinal, children with asthma. There's so many things, so many health impacts from the emissions, and worse so during events called blowdowns, when they vent a whole lot of these emissions into the air. So, I mean, it's really the Cadillac of polluters. So it was very alarming for us. So we very quickly realized that we were going to have to resist this with everything we had. So we've gone through a considerable process to do that. We've been through the regulatory process, which involved attending meetings with Dominion Energy, who proposed this project. It included the scoping meetings through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. These meetings were held outside of the county. So even though we had a compressor station, the deadliest part of a pipeline, really, because it's constant, it's every day, you're breathing these, you never get away from them 24/7 for the rest of your life. But they had these meetings in other locations, not even in the county. So a lot of our residents here are elderly. They don't get along well, and they weren't even able to attend these meetings. So we carried the information to them. We did our best. We had meetings at the Union Hill Church. Pastor Paul Wilson, the pastor there, has been wonderfully supportive. I counted up the other day, we've had almost 200 meetings in that church over the past 4 years. But we discovered a lot of things too. We did a house, we looked at the environmental impact statement that was submitted by Dominion, and discovered that they referred to our neighborhood as not well populated. I can't remember the exact words right now. Sparsely populated, I wrote it down. And, you know, just forest land. And, but this is not true, because, and in fact, this neighborhood is a neighborhood of at least up to 1/3 of freedmen, and 80%, nearly 80% African American. And many of those African American residents are elderly, children, and are part of those freedmen families that originally worked the plantations there. And in fact, the compressor station land that was bought for this proposed compressor station was part of a large plantation. So this is a continuous population of African Americans in this community. And it's not sparsely populated, it's densely populated. It's more like a suburban neighborhood. There's small land holdings. I mean, folks have really worked harder than most to have what they have. So this is really a gross injustice. Preservation in Virginia, in fact, designated this area as one of the most endangered places in Virginia. And later you hear from Richard, whose family goes back to those Freedmen days. Gosh, what else can I tell you? I do know, according to the latest, the final application that was being looked at now by DEQ, because we have this air permit comment period that we're in now. This is the last major permit that is required of Dominion Energy, ACP, Atlantic Coast Pipeline. That there are and this is according to their application, 269.4 thousand tons per year of toxic air emissions that go into our air. And that includes nitric oxides, particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, sulfur dioxide. This is an awful lot for people to be breathing. I mean, personally, I have a husband who's a stone worker, stone sculptor, and he works outside 10 hours a day. We live a mile away. People farm animals are affected, water's affected. Everything for us would be changed dramatically in a very negative way. We're really concerned about our health, our water, our air. There's so much I could say about this, and unfortunately none of it's good. But, I think I talked about population. I have to say, I really feel as though this is really a moral issue. I mean, to take away the basic things that we all need to live, air and water, the land we live on, for profit, there's something extremely wrong about that. And it seems as though it's the poor and the marginalized who suffer the most, as we're seeing with the global warming. And this is another example of how this happens right down here locally in Buckingham. So we're standing up, we're resisting this. So we're having our air permit hearing. It's actually very soon, it's tomorrow in Buckingham at the middle school there. We're asking for comments from people. Go to our website, friendsofbuckinghamcounty.org. You'll find plenty there to educate you, to make a good comment. Or if you're local, you could come to the meeting itself. You don't have to say anything. It'd be good if you can, but support us. We really need people's support on this.
Thank you, Chad. I would like to introduce our second speaker, who is Queen Zakia. And I guess you're unmuted now, Queen. And Queen Zakia Shabazz is an author, educator, lecturer, wife, and mother of 6. In 1996, Mrs. Shabazz discovered that her young son had been poisoned by lead. This prompted her to establish the Virginia chapter of United Parents Against Lead and to write an account of her family's struggles with lead poisoning in a book entitled A Child is a Terrible Thing to Waste. She also was the coordinator of the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative, which represents 18 civil rights, environmental, educational, faith-based, and grassroots organizations across the Commonwealth. Queen Shabazz, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'd like to start with a quote by Sandra Cisneros. "We do this because the world we live in is a house on fire and the people we love are burning." And that's why the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative is standing with Friends of Buckingham, Friends of Nelson County, and all of the other marginalized communities across the state of Virginia. We want to send the message loud and clear that this site is not suitable for a gas compressor station. The Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative, we have written a letter that is going to Governor Northam, Senators Warner and Kane, Virginia State legislatures, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commissioners, Dominion Resources, and Department of Environmental Quality. To say that, as Chad so eloquently stated, all of the disruption that will be done just for monetary gain and just the discounting of the lives that are there. We know that there are six public schools, 3 of those being elementary schools, and the school board was not notified of the compressor station. And some of those parents still have not been notified. If it were not for the community speaking out, Friends of Buckingham and such organizations, then the school board would not have gotten involved. We know that it will be 100% contamination of the water sources. And water is life. How are we going to live if we don't have fresh, clean water to drink? I mean, I got involved, as Armin said, with lead poisoning and having a son who was poisoned. And then we had the crisis in Flint, Michigan. So this is just another example of how marginalized frontline communities are discounted. There's a whole community in Union Hill that were left off the census tract, that were left off when Dominion Resources or Dominion Energy went in to get the permit. They just act as if that population didn't exist, that they weren't there. We cannot continue to allow this. And I think that some of the questions we should, first of all, be asking are, how did Dominion, first of all, get eminent domain? That's been a big one with me. How did they get eminent domain? And how do you just come in, as has always been the promises, we're bringing you jobs. So they offer, say, maybe 1,000 jobs to kill 100,000 people. It doesn't balance out. And these are the things that we should be looking at. And that's why the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative stands with Friends of Buckingham, Yogurville, Union Hill, and all other marginalized and seemingly voiceless communities across the state of Virginia. We are here to stand with you and to help to give you that voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Queen. Really appreciate that. I'd like to introduce our third speaker, who is Richard Walker. Richard, I guess have your microphone on unmute. And Richard is the CEO and founder of Bridging the Gap in Virginia. He's originally from Buckingham and is an advocate for the defense of his freedmen family's land and heritage. He is the 5th generation of freed slaves from a Union Hill family that has owned land there since 1885. Richard?
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate what Queen Zakia just said. You know, this is a never-ending saga in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where big business or legislation has preyed on the backs of the marginalized, the less thought of, those individuals that do not have a voice. Since I've started my organization, Bridging the Gap Virginia, I've been that voice, you know, for those individuals, whether it be in the injustices of the justice system or whether it be the pipeline, Atlantic Coast Pipeline, that is trying to get an easement on our property. As I am a 5th generation Harper that own that land. 25 acres under Taylor Harper and another 26 acres under Arthur Harper, who both were, Taylor Harper was a former slave, became freedman, and he received this land in 1893. You know, it has some historical essence, but moreover, you know, it's just showing the continuous exploitation of minorities, of African Americans in the Commonwealth of Virginia, not just specifically in Buckingham, but in every aspect of the Commonwealth of Virginia. It has completely, continuously marginalized individual people of color. And it's high time that it stop. It's high time. I appreciate it, and I regret that I hadn't come on board 4 years ago. You know, I'm in the General Assembly on a regular basis in every session, and them folk don't like me, but I don't care. You know, because I can see the exploitation that's going on, that Dominion, they've allowed big business to infiltrate our community, where everywhere you go in the state of Virginia, buildings are sponsored or named after Dominion Virginia Power. You know, they have controlled the entire state through greed and money. And the legislators that are supposedly representing us, they are allowing it. They are allowing big business to just, you know, sell the Commonwealth of Virginia real cheap, you know, and then they exploit the individuals that they take it out on. I was just in Buckingham last Thursday where the surveyors were on our property, you know, trying to get an idea of where the stretch of easement that Dominion is looking to take or looking to have in order to connect the Transco line to the compressor line, to the new ACP line. I just have to say, I didn't like the process. I was there. I wanted to assure that they looked at every crook and cranny to see if there were wetlands, see if there was wildlife, to see if there were any burials in that area. Because I refuse to allow them to give me some fake documentation to say all is well. I refuse. If I have, we're currently in court right now for the easement, but they're looking at eminent domain. I will fight it to the end. I will fight it to the end. You know, whatever happens at that point, you know, at least we know that I put up my best effort to stop it. You know, Governor Northam, Governor McAuliffe, I worked under Governor McAuliffe, helped him get in office. I was a part of his stakeholders group for restoration of rights, but then I see that he flipped the script on us by pushing this pipeline. You know, Northam is sitting back, waiting, but it's not putting in a whole lot of input to change the process of what these folk are doing, whether it be the air, the water, or the land erosion. You know, Governor Northam, it's time for you to get involved. You can do an executive order to stop all this with the quickness. McAuliffe did it when he was in office. He promoted it, you know. So it's time for you to see the reality of what it's doing to 80% African Americans in a rural area that is well below the poverty level. And it's deplorable the way the state has allowed big business to take over and run folk out. My cousins that reside there right on Union Hill Road, they are sickly already for the fumes and the methane and the gases that are coming out of that compressor is just going to sign their death. You know, and if at that point, if I got a lawsuit, I will come after you. I will come after you if that's the cause of my family's death. And we will be going back and forth to the doctor and taking water samples and taking air samples to make sure that whatever it is you're contriving will not affect my family members. We have a strong heritage of our culture of coming through Buckingham since. As a child, even though I'm from New Jersey, I was in Buckingham every summer. So I saw where we had a natural spring on our property. I saw where the wetlands were. I saw where the grazing for the animals were, you know, and I have a big problem with allowing these folk to just come and destroy all of our history. You know, I'm currently completing an application right now to have our land deemed as a historical landmark and hope that might be a protection against them coming through and destroying everything that's been there. If you are against the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, please join these organizations to help change. Send a letter to the governor. Send a letter to the DEQ and let them know that this is wrong. It is innately wrong for them to do what they're doing and to continue to take advantage of marginalized African Americans in the state of Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Richard, that was really, really, really good. Our next presenter is Beth Roach. She's a community organizer with Mothers Out Front and an old member of the Nottoway Indian Tribe of Virginia and a member of the Governor's Advisory Council on Environmental Justice. Beth, thank you for being here.
Nottoway, Oren, thank you for everyone for allowing me to speak today with you. I'm wearing many hats, but I'm here just to kind of give you a review what I've seen happen in this process. And I can tell you that there's huge power in story. And we led off with Chad describing the situation in Buckingham, and Queen followed with the environmental justice collaborative efforts to represent these voices. And then just hearing Richard just really, I think, proves that point. And so the Advisory Council on Environmental Justice was established with McAuliffe, and it was through the good work of the Environmental Justice Collaborative to get us formed. And we are a mixture of grassroots organizations, faith-based organizations, and academia. So our job is to provide advice and recommendations to the governor to improve equity and decision making and improve public health in marginalized communities, among other goals that you can see listed in Executive Order 73. So back in March, we are having a meeting, and the residents of Union Hill, Buckingham County, came to us, and during our public comment periods, just shared with us, all of the concerns and what was happening down in Buckingham. And at that point, there hadn't been a lot of government response. And so they invited us to come visit with them in May, and we did. And after an entire day of listening to their stories, after looking at the site visits, I mean, exactly what Chad and Richard are saying is true. I mean, that compressor station is built within a very densely populated community with very significant historic and cultural ties. There was really no question to us after that, all of that evidence, that it was definitely an environmental justice community. And so our response has been a formal letter that we have just recently reached consensus on and sent to the governor. And in it, we tell him, this is an environmental justice concern. And we list 7 topic areas, and it goes everywhere from civil rights to human rights and the health impacts, especially from the methane, the water quality risk assessments of the entire pipeline, looking at the historical and cultural resources, especially also blending in the fact that, a lot of Native American tribes, weren't properly adequately, I think, factored in or communicated with. And there's a lot of different nuances to that. And ultimately, we're asking the governor to establish a task force that's going to totally look at this situation from that holistic view. I mean, we know that there are so many things that you can look at separately. So if it's air permit, they're looking at air. If it's water, they're looking at water. But what is that entire health impact going to look like? And so we absolutely need more work done between all the different state agencies. We need everybody work together, true representation of members of our tribal groups and all of our historic and cultural groups, and just members of all the boards coming together to adequately give this compressor station and pipeline a good look. And we're, and this is definitely my personal opinion shared by many, we know that it's not needed and not adequate enough for what they've done so far.
Thank you, Beth. That was the last presenter, and I guess now we're going to get ready for the questions. And to the presenters that are here, again, I ask everyone to keep their microphones muted unless you are speaking, to ensure we can hear all the presenters. This is a telepress conference hosted by Global Justice Ecology Project, along with the Friends of Buckingham and the Virginia Environmental Justice Collective. Let's see. I guess we have people on the phone that we're going to unmute, and also people that are on the line. And people that are online, and if you would please send me your who you're with and then we will call on you. I think right now we're going to open up the line to the people that were on the call and open up the unmute them. So please unmute them. And do you have any questions, callers? Okay, so it doesn't seem like the callers have any questions. So I guess we'll go to, does anyone online want to ask a question? Here's a question. Zulo, has the governor's office responded to the advisory council's letter yet? So that's to everybody, and whoever wants to take that. Robert, do you want to be have your face on the screen? If you do, we're more than happy to put you on. Otherwise, I will just ask that question to let's see, was it to? I guess sorry, it was a question for Beth Roach. Beth, has the governor's office responded to the advisory council letter yet? Beth, you're muted. Beth, you're muted. Okay.
Sorry about that. As far as we know, formally no, the governor has not responded directly to the letter. It was our understanding that once we sent it, that it would be passed along, and our next step is scheduling a meeting with the governor to review it.
And we have another question. This is to everyone. How will this impact the people outside of the area? Which I would imagine, how do you believe that the compressor station and the pipeline will impact the people? That's to anyone who wants it.
I can answer that. I think we all have to worry about this proliferation of fossil fuel infrastructure. The more that they're able to put in, we're all going to be impacted sooner or later. You know, the frontline communities are feeling it more through global warming, through the sacrifice zones that they create when they do pipelines and compressor stations. But we're all going to feel it. We have to stop now. We have to start doing things with our energy. So we have the existing technology. We can start using other things. We do have the solar technology to do this now. It's time to start. It is starting. There's no reason to lock us into these things, because the more that they cite, the more of these things that are put forward and built, it just locks us into this system. I mean, there's predictions of another 20 years of fossil fuel infrastructure. We don't have the time right now for that. We really don't. I mean, climate warming is real. So it does affect all of us. If it affects one of us, it does affect all of us. I mean, I really, on a spiritual level, really believe that may be something that not everyone can embrace. But whether you want to look at this on a really physical earth level or a spiritual level, it will impact your life.
Thank you, Chad.
This is going to be over.
Does anyone else have anything to add on that?
I agree with you, Chad. It's definitely, we're all connected. And when you look at the proposed pipeline path, it's going to tunnel, or they want to tunnel underneath the James River. And how many of us, will be affected by that? And I think it's very crazy, Dominion and those who are making these decisions, not to see that. If they have any concern about their children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, and there being somewhere for them to live, water to drink, and clean soil to plant in, then how can they make these decisions without considering that? And so I absolutely agree that it will impact us one way or another. The waterways are all connected. So how do you contain it to any one area and say, oh, we're just going to kill these people over here? And I also want to add, when we talk about environmental justice, I know we're saying a lot about certain communities, but we are not saying that any one community is more deserving of being poisoned and polluted than the other. We want the total pollution to stop. Not to say we're going to move it from here and not in my backyard. We don't want it in anyone's backyard.
Yep.
Thank you, Queen.
And we want to send this to Dominion. Yes, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to add that Beth Roach had to leave the call for another obligation. And if there are any other questions concerning the Governor's Advisory Council on Environmental Justice, there is another member that we have here, Dr. Mary Finley Brooks. She's an associate professor of geography and environmental studies at the University of Richmond, a member of the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative, and as I said, a member of the Governor's Advisory Council on Environmental Justice. Mary, do you want to get on the camera and unmute yourself, and maybe if you wanted to say a few words, because you didn't really have a chance to say much, or you didn't have a chance to say anything. So if you want to do that.
I just want to say it's an honor to be here with people today. Certainly the Environmental Justice Collaborative and the Friends of Buckingham and impacted residents. It really means so much to me to be able to hear the comments that people have said, and I really want to reinforce what Queen Zakia was stating, that while today we want to pay attention to Union Hill, really the focus is on Union Hill. We want to be aware that these environmental injustices, environmental racism is a pattern across our state. It is not just in the energy sector. Certainly we have problems with coal ash and coal dust. We certainly have problems with pipelines and compressors. We have waste to energy projects and landfills that are disproportionately sited in communities of color and low-income communities. It goes beyond the energy sector, of course. So whether we're talking about asthma from industry and transportation, where our railroads are located, where our roads are located, where our mining is happening, it goes on, and we have so many patterns of injustice. Queen Zakia was talking about lead in the drinking water. So we have all of these issues we need to pay attention to. I'm really glad today the focus is on Union Hill, but I want us to be aware that while Union Hill is a wake-up call, we really need to pay attention. The local government has failed Union Hill, the state government has failed Union Hill, the federal government has failed Union Hill, and we need to make sure that this doesn't happen moving forward. We've only just made small baby steps in this state as far as addressing environmental justice. I'm very happy to serve on the Governor's Advisory Council. I'm very happy to be a member of the Environmental Justice Collaborative, but these are really only small steps. Our policy does not address cumulative impact. It doesn't look at comprehensive impact. It doesn't recognize historical and cultural resources. So while we can draw attention and hope to stop this permit from moving forward, we can hope that maybe the Air Pollution Control Board will make a sound decision. We can hope that our state officials will step in and protect communities such as Union Hill. We really have a lot more work to do at a state level, and I want us to remember that each of these cases is tied together and that we have so much more work to do. And I'm excited to be here with people in this struggle and making sure that this continues, this work continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. The Reverend Dr. Prem Anjali, I may be not saying your name correct, but he's asking a question to Mary. To Chad Oba's point about the timeline and urgency of this issue, why is the governor said he will let the process take its due course? Is that really his stance?
I can't speak for anybody but myself. I can say that I think there's a lot. What I've been told repeatedly by state officials is they are paying attention to this case, that they are hearing from people. So I would encourage you to send in your comments. I would encourage you to make sure that you continue to let people know what your position is. But I cannot say why the state government has not acted in a way that maybe meets with the urgency of the situation. I just can hope that that's because there's clear deliberation and that there will be attention moving forward. I know that bringing in the complexity of this case takes time, but I would hope that we're really paying attention to, for example, we just heard that local inhabitants don't have access to the internet. We heard that the air permit information was only brought to the local library with 18 days in what's supposed to be a 30-day comment period. So state officials really need to look at the fact that their process doesn't work. They're making it impossible for people to comment on technical reports that have such huge implications for their lives. So really it involves not only acting on this instance, but learning from this case to make sure that these other injustices aren't happening moving forward. I hope in my heart that our state officials will act and that they will take all of the information that's coming in about environmental racism, about environmental injustice, and concerns about the need for these pipelines and the climate forcing that happens. We know that the methane that's coming out of pipelines does not get counted, and we know that the governor has a commitment and has stated repeatedly a concern about the environmental integrity of our state. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to take those hopes and turn them into realities.
Thank you, Dr. Pro.
And I would say to the Reverend Prem Anjali, ask the governor yourself. I would write to the governor and ask him, what is your stance? Why are you not saying anything? Why are you sitting back? What is your real stance? I encourage people to write the governor.
Mr. Walker, would you like to add anything?
saw a question come up regarding employment, and I have to comment on the farce, more of African American exploitation when they had the two commercials of African Americans, the female and the male. The woman that came on and said that the pipeline is good for the economy, that the pipeline is good for education, that the pipeline is, and then they had this African American man come on and talk about, well, there are more jobs that I can help send my child to college. They were directed, targeted to affect the African American community, and they were strategically designed for that way. You don't see them no more, because I'm sure they've gotten the message that you cannot continue to exploit us. And that's what they did. They think that those two individuals were representation of Union Hill or any other area where the pipelines are being constructed at. And I just think Dominion is a joke, and that they're utilizing all of their tools to make it look like they're doing the next right thing. And it's a bunch of crap.
Well said. And thank you very much, Richard. Callers, do you have anything to say? You're on mute. Well, does anybody else have any questions on the web? Does anybody on the presenters, anything that you want to add to kind of close this? It seems like we're right about the end.
I have something. This is Steve Taylor.
Steve, go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
I just wanted to let the group know that we've had a few requests for photos from the media regarding this. So if anyone has any good photos to share, just send them my way, okay? Regarding the sites.
Thank you. And this is a follow-up from the Reverend Dr. Pramanjali. What is the most impactful action we can all do together?
Well, locally, I would say check that website I gave in the beginning, friendsofbuckinghamcounty.org, and look through the whole thing. You will find an enormous amount of education there on pipelines and compressor stations and ways that you can interact. And of course, we have our public comment period ending tomorrow, 11:59 p.m. So there's still time to put in a comment or to come to the hearing. So that's what I would say from the local level of this.
And
This is
there's
Mary.
the
I'd love to
Sierra
take it.
Club.
Oh, go ahead.
The Sierra Club will be having a party this evening at 6 to encourage people to also participate in the public comment section and give an education on how that process works. You can look at them on Facebook. The Sierra Club is Virginia chapter is one of the collaboratives partners, and it's on the website, but it is the Virginia chapter Sierra Club. So I would encourage people to go there to get that information on how to be a part of the process, the public comment process.
Yeah, and I think there's a meeting in Richmond tonight. Is that true?
That's the one that I'm speaking of.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
wonderful.
that's it, at the Sierra Club office.
Thank you.
So I was going to take a big picture perspective on that as well. As somebody who lives in Richmond, I am a captive customer of Dominion Energy. So I only have one source of supply for my energy, and I'd like all of the million consumers out there that do purchase energy from Dominion Energy to think about where their energy is coming from and to really think about the costs of the energy. Every time we turn on our light switches, every time that we use electricity, I think we need to think about our implications as consumers. So I would like us to think beyond any individual project, to think about how the natural gas, the coal, and these fossil fuels that we're using create such harm in communities, whether we're going back to the fracking where this stuff is coming from, or the pipeline communities, or the compressor station communities. And so thinking about it big picture, we need to make sure that we're creating energy alternatives, we're creating renewables, we're creating things that don't cause these sacrifice zones in communities, and we're really thinking about our consumption, and we're reducing what we do. We need to change our lifestyle lifestyles. We need to not just look at this community and suggest that we can live and burn all the natural gas that we need and want without recognizing that there are costs at the community level. So if we're going to think about what we could all do together, it's about changing our consumption and thinking about how we're connected to the earth and to other people around the earth.
I'd like to echo that. And I just have to say, you know, when people are talking about the economics around this, it would cost a lot more to mitigate all of the impacts of climate change due to fossil fuel infrastructures than any good that can come from them, despite promises of jobs, which really we found don't really exist. They're farmed out. They're union jobs. We don't even have union workers here in our county. So there's no economic advantage, and we're all going to feel the impacts.
I just had a message about the URL to Friends of Buckingham, and it's from Appalachian Voices. And anyway, I'm not sure what the correct URL is, but for Friends of Buckingham, Chad, you can think about that for a minute. I have some other things that are that have came in, and when talking about, go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, no, they're absolutely right. I was confusing it with our Facebook post, which is Friends of Buckingham County. So the URL is friendsofbuckinghamvirginia.org. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting that, App Voices.
Yeah, thank you, App Voices, and thank you, Chad, for responding. I guess I'm getting a few things kind of about protests and tree sits and things like that. And the Reverend Dr. Premanjali said, I've written to DEQ and I'm a member of Friends of Buckingham, but is there something that can be even more powerful? Yes, tree sitters and others will get national attention. That's all of you.
Well, I think it's not only paying attention to where these movements are occurring, and they are occurring across the pipeline. So yes, we've had quite a number of people who have taken to trees or to pods, more on the Mountain Valley pipeline than the Atlantic Coast pipeline. But I think part of the discussion that needs to happen is, how does our state respond? How do security forces respond? I know that in the state of Virginia, as occurs in many other locations, we're spending thousands and thousands of dollars on increased security presence, but often what that security is doing is, for example, preventing food, preventing water to get to those people who are sitting in trees. It's actually violating the rights of the people who were there making a statement. It's keeping supporters away from to provide support to those that are up in trees. It's meaning that when we go to meetings, for example, when we went to a meeting in Buckingham a couple of weeks ago, I was astonished to see how many state police were there, and what they were, you know, the things that they were presenting were a grandmother from taking a bandana in her purse to go into a hearing where she might have symbolically covered her mouth to show that she's not able to speak, or that she's worried about the toxic fumes. I really worry about a state where, instead of making sure we're hearing from people and that we have access to press and we have access to information, is spending a lot of money on security to make sure that people's voices aren't heard, and are making sure to make life as difficult as possible for those who are speaking out. So I think bringing up the protests and the tree sits are very important, because it's a recognition that we're not prioritizing the voices of those who are vulnerable and those who are impacted. We are instead making sure that they aren't heard, and we're squashing really the responses that, of course, are coming from Virginia. Of course, Virginians are responding by taking to trees, or by standing in front of buildings with signs, or even going to meetings with masks. Of course, that is our response. Look at the situation, and we hope people will pay attention to what's really going on here, and take the time to hear the voices of those who are impacted, and really see what's happening in local communities as a result of this fossil fuel infrastructure.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, these are desperate measures because no one is listening. We've been through the regulatory process. It did not work for us. No one listened. When the special use permit was presented to our Board of Supervisors, our local governing body, even though 90% spoke out against it, they passed it anyway to permit it to be
Rose.
Yeah.
on the water. We're still a little hopeful. We're hoping. And of course, we have the year permit coming. But it does not seem as though our regulatory agencies are listening at all. So people are desperate. You're taking away the basic things they need to live: water and air and the land they live upon. What else are people to do?
That's right. We've chained ourselves to machineries and gotten arrested.
Yes,
Another
yes.
suggestion I would have is to contact the Environmental Protection Agency and ask what are they doing? What is their role in this process? They are established to protect the environment and the people in it. So what are they doing? Perhaps ask our legislatures to fully fund the EPA so that they would have adequate personnel and human resources to address these issues that we're bringing forth to them, you know. But those are questions that we need to constantly ask. Be there on election day. We have elections coming up. Find out those candidates' stance. You know, where do you stand on environmental justice? What are you going to do about these issues? And you know, if you want our vote, we need to know what are you going to do for us and to make sure that we have a future.
Thank you, Queen Shabazz. I have another, would you mind giving your URL for the collaborative, please?
Yes, I think I just did.
Yeah, she did.
You did?
You see it?
Okay.
Yes, I
I'm
did.
sorry.
That's
Okay. Oh, yeah,
You see it?
anyway, would, Richard, do you want to say anything as kind of a wrap up?
Well, like I said, it's the legacy of my family, you know, and we do have Native American Indians in our family as well. So it's just been this complete exploitation of that segment of folk in the county that, you know, it bothers me to no end, you know, and they do it in every part of the system in the Commonwealth of Virginia. My biggest fight, and has been for the last 10 years, is fighting the injustices in the justice system, fighting the injustices in the environment, fighting the injustices when it comes to civil rights and human rights in the Commonwealth of Virginia. You know, all of that plays a part in what they're still allowing the big business to do right now in this instance. You know, where are we going to keep allowing the Commonwealth of Virginia to keep doing this, promulgating their issues or their greed upon folk that are marginalized? When are they going to stop? When are they going to stop disallowing primarily African Americans from feeling the injustices throughout the entire state of Virginia? They wonder where the crime is coming from, where the substance abuse is coming from, where the mental health issues are coming from, where everything that is negative is in the African American community. Is a direct result of them not allowing us to have a piece of the American pie. And that's in the injustices of the environment as well. It's high time that Virginia embraces the diversity of the state and catch up with the rest of the country.
Thank you,
Thank
Richard.
you.
Well, I think we're kind of running on the hour time here, and really appreciate everybody's comments, and really thank you so much for the all the speakers. And I started this, I think, off by saying something that, you know, we live in a time where the climate is getting very, very bad, and we are living into a kind of a climate crisis. So this is real serious. It's not just something we can read about and say it's going to happen later. It's here right now. People just need to open their eyes and see what's going on in the world and see what's going on. I mean, I think what we're seeing in Virginia right now, things like this are going on everywhere, and people are standing up and struggling against this. And very, very good that people are, because I don't think people are going to go down that easily. But I really thank everyone. And if there's no more questions, I guess we should say this is kind of the wrap. Does anybody have anything more to say? Any more questions? No? Okay, well, the other thing.
Can I just close us out with a brief prayer?
Right ahead.
It's in Arabic, and it says Ahudu billahi mina shaitan irajin, and loosely translated, it means we seek refuge and protection from Shaitan, the cursed devil, and in this instance, dominion would be the devil.
I think that that's a marvelous way to end this.